Discover the hidden secrets of Napoleon Hill and Nietzsche that turned their minds into impenetrable fortresses. When you apply these teachings, something extraordinary will happen. Your presence will begin to intimidate even the most powerful. Deep revelations have come to light about the true power of the human mind, and your life will change forever in ways no one could ever imagine. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. You've felt it before, haven't you? That moment when someone walks into a room and the entire atmosphere shifts, not because they're loud or demanding attention, but because there's something fundamentally different about them. Something that makes others step back, lean in, or simply fall silent. They possess what philosophers and success masters have, called the unshakable mind, a fortress of mental steel that intimidates not through aggression, but through absolute unwavering presence. What if you could develop this same quality? What if you could become the person who commands respect simply by existing in your own skin, completely unbothered by the chaos that sends others spiraling into panic and self-doubt? The unshakable mind isn't born, it's forged. Like a sword, heated in fire and hammered on an anvil, your mental fortitude develops through deliberate practice, philosophical understanding, and the courage to stand apart from the reactive masses. Napoleon Hill understood this when he studied the most successful minds of his era. Friedrich Nietzsche grasped it when he wrote about becoming who you are, regardless of what others think or expect. But here's what most people miss. An unshakable mind doesn't just benefit you. It fundamentally changes how others perceive and interact with you. When you refuse to be shaken by criticism, manipulation, or external pressure, you create an invisible force field that both attracts and intimidates. People sense that their usual tactics, emotional manipulation, social pressure, aggressive posturing, simply bounce off you like rain off a mountain. Think about the last time you encountered someone who seemed completely immune to drama, gossip, or the emotional turbulence that affects everyone else. Remember how that made you feel. There was probably a mixture of admiration and slight intimidation, wasn't there? You found yourself respecting them more, being more careful with your words, perhaps even feeling a desire to earn their approval. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. The unshakable mind isn't emotionless, it's emotion-proof. You still feel deeply, love passionately, and engage authentically, but you've learned to separate your inner world from the external storms that rage around you. You've discovered the secret that ancient Stoics knew. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can master how you respond. Why is this mental state so powerful? Because in a world full of reactive people, the person who remains centered and deliberate stands out like a lighthouse in a hurricane. While others are swept away by their impulses, emotions, and the opinions of those around them, you remain anchored to your own principles and vision. Consider the businessman who never raises his voice during heated negotiations, yet somehow gets exactly what he wants. Think about the woman who faces criticism with such calm dignity that her accusers end up apologizing. Picture the leader who makes decisions based on logic and long-term thinking rather than popular opinion or immediate gratification. These people intimidate not through force, but through the raw power of mental discipline. The unshakable mind operates on principles that most people abandon the moment things get difficult. It maintains standards when others compromise. It chooses patience when others react in haste. It sees opportunity where others see only problems. This consistency, this refusal to be pushed around by circumstances, creates a gravitational pull that draws others into your orbit while simultaneously making them hesitant to challenge you directly. But perhaps the most intimidating aspect of an unshakable mind is its freedom. You become free from the need for approval, free from the fear of criticism, free from the exhausting game of trying to control how others perceive you. This freedom is visible to everyone around you, and it makes them acutely aware of their own mental prisons. They see in you what they wish they could be, and that recognition creates both attraction and intimidation. You've probably noticed this dynamic in your own life. The people who seem most confident and self-assured often make others feel slightly uncomfortable, not because they're arrogant or hostile, but because their presence highlights everyone else's insecurities and self-doubt. They serve as a mirror, reflecting back the mental weakness that most people would rather ignore. The unshakable mind doesn't seek to intimidate. Intimidation is simply a byproduct of genuine inner strength. When you truly don't need anything from others, their approval, their validation, their permission, you operate from a position of power that most people have never experienced. This power is quiet, subtle, and absolutely devastating to those who try to manipulate or control you. Napoleon Hill discovered through his research that successful people share certain mental characteristics. They think in principles rather than emotions. They make decisions based on logic rather than impulse. They maintain their course despite criticism or temporary setbacks. They understand that external circumstances are temporary, but character is permanent. These qualities create a psychological atmosphere that others find both compelling and intimidating. Nietzsche wrote about the importance of becoming who you are, of creating your own values rather than accepting what society hands you. This process of self-creation requires enormous mental strength and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. The person who has undergone this transformation becomes a force of nature, unmovable in their convictions, unshakable in their purpose, and unintimidated by the judgments of those who lack the courage to forge their own path. The truly unshakable mind understands that intimidation isn't about making others fear you. It's about making them respect the boundaries you've established and the standards you maintain. It's about demonstrating through your actions that you live by principles that won't bend under pressure. It's about showing the world that you've developed an internal compass that's more powerful than any external force. This mental state affects every aspect of your life. In relationships, you attract partners who respect strength rather than those who prey on weakness. In business, you command higher fees and better terms because people sense they're dealing with someone who won't be easily manipulated. In social situations, you become the person others turn to for guidance and stability because they trust your judgment and admire your consistency. But the journey to developing an unshakable mind requires more than just understanding its benefits. It demands a complete restructuring of how you think about yourself, your relationships, and your place in the world. It requires you to abandon the comfortable illusions that keep most people trapped in cycles of reactivity and emotional dependence. The person with an unshakable mind has learned to find their center regardless of external circumstances. They've developed what warriors call the still point, that place of absolute calm from which all effective action springs. From this center, they can observe without being disturbed, respond without being reactive, and maintain their dignity without being defensive. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Like building physical strength, developing mental fortitude requires consistent practice and gradual progression. But the payoff is extraordinary. You become someone who cannot be shaken, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be controlled by forces outside yourself. You become the kind of person that others both admire and fear to cross, not because you're dangerous, but because you're completely self-contained. The unshakable mind recognizes that most of what people call power is actually weakness disguised as strength. True power comes from within, from the absolute certainty that you can handle whatever life brings your way. This certainty is visible to others and creates an aura of competence and confidence that's both attractive and intimidating. Are you ready to discover what it feels like to be completely unshakable? Are you prepared to develop the kind of mental strength that makes others think twice before attempting to manipulate, pressure, or control you? Are you willing to do what most people won't do in order to become who most people can't become? The path to an unshakable mind begins with a simple recognition. You are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you are certainly not the opinions that others have of you. You are the conscious observer of all these things, and from that position of observation, you have the power to choose how you respond to any situation. Imagine a version of yourself that remains calm and centered, regardless of what's happening around you. Picture yourself handling criticism with grace, pressure with poise, and challenges with unshakable confidence. Visualize the respect and admiration you'll command when people realize they're dealing with someone who cannot be rattled, cannot be rushed, and cannot be manipulated into abandoning their principles. This isn't a fantasy. It's a possibility that's available to anyone willing to do the inner work required to build genuine mental strength. The question isn't whether you can develop an unshakable mind. The question is whether you're willing to abandon the mental habits and emotional patterns that keep you trapped in weakness and reactivity. Imagine a world where you never again worry about what others think of you, where criticism rolls off you like water off a duck's back, where you make decisions based on your own values rather than the expectations of others. Imagine being so centered in your own power that people can sense it the moment they meet you, creating an immediate atmosphere of respect and admiration that follows you wherever you go. Look around you. Really look. What do you see? You see people checking their phones every few minutes, desperately seeking validation through likes, comments, and shares. You witness grown adults having emotional meltdowns because someone disagreed with them on social media. You observe individuals changing their entire personality based on who they're talking to, morphing like chameleons to gain acceptance from whoever happens to be in front of them. This is the epidemic of mental weakness that has infected our society. The vast majority of people have become emotional puppets, dancing to whatever tune the world decides to play for them. They've surrendered their power to external circumstances, other people's opinions, and the constant noise of a culture that profits from their insecurity and reactivity. But here's what's truly frustrating. Most people don't even realize they're living this way. They think this constant state of emotional turbulence is normal. They believe that being offended by every slight, threatened by every criticism, and dependent on others for their sense of self-worth is just being human. They've accepted weakness as their natural state and called it authenticity. Watch how people respond when someone challenges their opinion. Instead of remaining calm and confident in their position, they become defensive, aggressive, or retreat into victimhood. They take everything personally because they've never learned to separate their identity from their ideas. Their ego is so fragile that any disagreement feels like a personal attack. Notice how quickly people abandon their principles when faced with social pressure. They'll compromise their values, change their stance, or remain silent about what they believe just to avoid conflict or disapproval. They've traded their integrity for the illusion of acceptance, not realizing that this trade makes them weaker and less respected, not more. See how they react to setbacks and challenges. Instead of viewing obstacles as opportunities to grow stronger, they crumble at the first sign of difficulty. They blame external circumstances, other people, or bad luck for their problems rather than taking responsibility for their responses. They've become victims of their own mental weakness, helpless in the face of life's inevitable challenges. This collective mental fragility has created a culture where being offended is considered a virtue, where emotional reactions are valued over logical thinking, and where the loudest, most dramatic response gets the most attention. People compete to be the most outraged, the most hurt, the most victimized, because they've learned that emotional displays can be used to manipulate others and avoid personal responsibility. But the most tragic part? These same people wonder why they feel powerless, why others don't respect them, why they constantly feel anxious and uncertain. They can't understand why they're not taken seriously in business, why their relationships are unstable, why they never seem to achieve their goals. They don't realize that their mental weakness is broadcasting itself to everyone around them, creating the very outcomes they're trying to avoid. Let me tell you about Marcus, not his real name, but his story is real enough that you've probably witnessed something similar yourself. Marcus was intelligent, hard-working, and had all the external qualifications for success. He graduated from a prestigious university, landed a good job at a respected company, and seemed destined for greatness. But Marcus had never learned to develop mental strength. He'd been praised for his intelligence his entire life, but no one had ever taught him how to handle criticism, rejection, or failure. His parents had solved every problem for him. His teachers had focused on protecting his self-esteem rather than building his character. And he'd grown up believing that the world should adapt to him rather than the other way around. When Marcus started his career, everything seemed fine initially. His intelligence carried him through the easy wins and obvious solutions, but as he encountered more complex challenges, his mental weakness began to show. When a colleague criticized his approach to a project, Marcus didn't engage with the feedback constructively. He took it as a personal attack and spent weeks obsessing over what was said, letting it affect his performance and mood. When his supervisor suggested improvements to his work, Marcus became defensive and argumentative, rather than seeing it as an opportunity to learn and grow. He interpreted guidance as criticism and mentoring as rejection. His emotional reactions to feedback made his colleagues uncomfortable working with him, and his supervisor began to question his leadership potential. The turning point came during a high-stakes presentation to senior executives. Marcus had prepared extensively and knew his material inside and out. But when one executive asked a challenging question that seemed to question his assumptions, Marcus felt his composure crumble. Instead of remaining calm and addressing the question professionally, he became flustered, defensive, and ultimately hostile. His voice cracked as he tried to explain himself. His hands shook as he fumbled through his notes. His face reddened with embarrassment and anger. The executives watched this display of emotional instability with barely concealed discomfort. In that moment, Marcus revealed that beneath his impressive credentials was a mind that could be easily shaken, a person who couldn't handle pressure when it really mattered. The presentation that should have been his breakthrough became his downfall. Word spread quickly through the company about his meltdown. Colleagues began to distance themselves from him. His supervisor started excluding him from important projects. Marcus had revealed his mental weakness at the worst possible moment, and the damage to his reputation was irreversible. But Marcus didn't learn from this experience. Instead of recognizing that he needed to develop mental strength, he blamed the executives for asking unfair questions. He criticized the company culture for being too aggressive. He convinced himself that his emotional reaction was justified and that everyone else was the problem. As his career stagnated, Marcus became increasingly bitter and reactive. He jumped from job to job, always finding fault with his employers, colleagues, or circumstances. He never realized that he was carrying his mental weakness with him wherever he went, creating the same problems over and over again. He never understood that his inability to remain calm under pressure, handle criticism gracefully, or maintain his composure during challenges was broadcasting his incompetence to everyone around him. Marcus represents millions of people who have talent, intelligence, and opportunity, but lack the mental strength to capitalize on their advantages. They sabotage themselves with their own reactivity, emotional instability, and inability to maintain their center when faced with adversity. They wonder why others don't take them seriously, not realizing that their mental weakness is visible to everyone they encounter. This is what happens when you allow your mind to be shaken by external circumstances. You become unreliable, unpredictable, and ultimately unemployable in any position that requires real responsibility. People learn that they can't count on you to remain steady when things get difficult, so they stop giving you opportunities that matter. The tragedy is that Marcus, and millions like him, could have had a completely different outcome if he'd understood the importance of mental strength. If he'd learned to remain calm under pressure, to receive feedback without becoming defensive, to maintain his composure regardless of external circumstances, his career would have followed an entirely different trajectory. Instead, he became another casualty of the mental weakness epidemic, joining the ranks of people who blame external factors for their internal failures. He never realized that the power to change his entire life was within his own mind, waiting to be developed through deliberate practice and philosophical understanding. This is the cost of mental weakness. It turns potential into disappointment, opportunity into missed chances, and talent into wasted gifts. It creates a downward spiral where each failure to maintain composure leads to fewer opportunities, which leads to more frustration and reactivity, which leads to even fewer opportunities. But perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this situation is how preventable it is. The mental strength that Marcus lacked isn't some rare gift that only a few people possess. It's a skill that can be developed by anyone willing to do the work. The principles that create an unshakable mind have been known for thousands of years, refined by philosophers, proven by successful people throughout history, and available to anyone who chooses to study and apply them. The difference between Marcus and the people who command respect and achieve their goals isn't talent, intelligence, or luck. It's the decision to develop mental strength rather than accepting mental weakness as inevitable. It's the choice to build an unshakable foundation rather than allowing yourself to be blown around by every wind of circumstance. You see this pattern everywhere once you start looking for it. Talented people destroying their own careers with emotional outbursts. Intelligent individuals undermining their credibility with defensive reactions. Capable workers limiting their advancement because they can't handle criticism or pressure with grace. These people don't understand that in a world full of reactive, emotionally unstable individuals, the person who remains calm and centered automatically stands out. They don't realize that mental strength is the ultimate competitive advantage, more valuable than intelligence, education, or connections. They've never learned that respect is earned not through talent alone, but through demonstrating the ability to maintain your principles and composure regardless of external pressure. The saddest part is watching people with tremendous potential settle for mediocrity because they never develop the mental discipline to handle success. They sabotage their own advancement with their reactivity, push away opportunities with their defensiveness, and wonder why life seems to favor others who appear less deserving. But here's what they're missing. Those less deserving people often possess the one quality that trumps all others: mental strength. They've learned to remain unshakable in the face of adversity, criticism, and pressure. They've developed the ability to think clearly when others are panicking, to remain principled when others are compromising, and to maintain their dignity when others are losing control. This is why mental strength is so intimidating to those who lack it. They recognize on some level that they're dealing with someone who operates by different rules, someone who won't be manipulated by emotional appeals, won't be rattled by aggressive tactics, and won't be swayed by social pressure. This recognition creates a mixture of admiration and fear that fundamentally changes the dynamic of every interaction. The mentally weak person is at the mercy of circumstances, other people's moods, and their own uncontrolled emotions. The mentally strong person creates their own circumstances, maintains their equilibrium regardless of others' behavior, and masters their emotional responses. Which person would you rather be? Which person commands more respect? Which person is more likely to achieve their goals and live according to their values? And if you decided to make a different choice than Marcus did? What if you decided that mental weakness was not your destiny? That emotional reactivity was not your natural state? That being shaken by external circumstances was not who you had to be? What if you chose to develop the kind of mental strength that makes others stop and take notice, the kind of unshakable presence that commands respect and creates opportunities? The truth about mental strength has been hidden in plain sight for over 2,000 years. From the ancient Stoics to modern researchers, from philosophical giants to practical success masters, the principles that create an unshakable mind have been documented, tested, and proven effective across cultures and centuries. Yet most people remain ignorant of these principles, or worse, they know them intellectually but never apply them consistently enough to experience their transformative power. Let's establish the fundamental logic that governs mental strength. If reactive thinking leads to weakness and failure, then deliberate thinking leads to strength and success. If emotional instability creates chaos and missed opportunities, then emotional mastery creates order and opens doors. If dependence on external validation makes you vulnerable and manipulable, then internal validation makes you powerful and free. This isn't philosophy for philosophy's sake. This is the practical science of human achievement and influence. Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying the most successful people of his era, and he discovered that they all shared certain mental characteristics. They thought in principles rather than emotions. They made decisions based on logic rather than impulse. They maintained their course despite criticism or temporary setbacks. They understood that external circumstances are temporary, but character is permanent. Most importantly, they had developed what Hill called mental immunity. the ability to remain unaffected by the negativity, criticism, and doubt of others. Hill recognized that success isn't primarily about intelligence, education, or even opportunity. It's about mental discipline, the capacity to direct your thoughts toward your goals regardless of external distractions or internal resistance. The people who achieved extraordinary results had learned to master their own minds first, and everything else followed from that foundation. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this principle from a different angle. He wrote about the necessity of becoming who you are, of creating your own values, rather than accepting what society hands you. This process of self-creation requires enormous mental strength and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. Nietzsche called this the development of the Übermensch, not a superior human being in the sense of dominance over others, but a self-determined individual who has transcended the need for external validation and approval. The person who has undergone this transformation becomes what Nietzsche described as one who gives style to his character. They've learned to impose their will on their circumstances rather than allowing circumstances to shape them. They've developed the mental armor necessary to pursue their vision regardless of opposition, criticism, or temporary failure. Carl Jung approached this same truth through the lens of psychology. He understood that most people live their entire lives unconsciously, driven by impulses, fears, and desires they've never examined. They react to situations based on conditioning rather than conscious choice. They allow their shadows, their suppressed fears and insecurities, to control their behavior and limit their potential. Jung's concept of individuation is essentially the process of developing mental strength. It requires becoming conscious of your unconscious patterns, taking responsibility for your psychological development, and learning to respond to life from a place of awareness rather than automaticity. The person who completes this process becomes what Jung called individuated, psychologically whole, and no longer at the mercy of unconscious drives or external pressures. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught perhaps the most practical approach to mental strength. Having experienced slavery and physical disability, he understood that external circumstances cannot touch your inner freedom unless you allow them to. His famous teaching, "It's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters," captures the essence of mental invincibility. Epictetus taught that there are only two types of things in this world, those within your control and those outside your control. Your thoughts, judgments, decisions, and responses are within your control. Everything else, other people's behavior, external events, even your own emotions, is outside your direct control. The unshakable mind focuses exclusively on what it can control and remains indifferent to everything else. This creates a psychological fortress that cannot be breached by external attacks. When you truly understand that your peace of mind depends only on your own thoughts and responses, you become immune to the manipulation, criticism, and pressure that controls most people. You develop what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable, tranquility of mind. Viktor Frankl discovered these same principles under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. In the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, he observed that the prisoners who survived were not necessarily the physically strongest or the most privileged. They were the ones who maintained their inner freedom regardless of external circumstances. They had found what Frankl called the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose your attitude in any given situation. Frankl realized that meaning and purpose come from within, not from external circumstances. The person who has developed this inner orientation becomes unshakable because their source of strength is not dependent on favorable conditions. They have learned to find meaning in struggle, purpose in adversity, and growth in challenge. This makes them psychologically invincible and profoundly intimidating to those who derive their identity from external circumstances. James Clear's research on habit formation provides the modern scientific framework for developing these ancient principles. He demonstrated that consistent small actions, repeated over time, create fundamental changes in identity and capability. The person who practices mental discipline daily, through meditation, journaling, physical exercise, or philosophical study, gradually develops an unshakable core that cannot be disrupted by temporary setbacks or external pressure. Clear's work shows that you become what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly practice emotional reactions, you become an emotionally reactive person. If you repeatedly practice mental discipline, you become a mentally disciplined person. If you repeatedly practice remaining calm under pressure, you become someone who cannot be rattled by pressure. This isn't willpower, it's identity transformation through consistent practice. Now consider the logical chain that connects these insights. If mental weakness creates vulnerability and limits potential, then mental strength creates invulnerability and unlocks potential. If reactive thinking leads to poor decisions and missed opportunities, then deliberate thinking leads to wise decisions and seized opportunities. If emotional instability makes you unreliable and untrustworthy, then emotional mastery makes you dependable and trustworthy. The unshakable mind operates like a mountain in a storm. The wind may howl, the rain may pour, the lightning may flash, but the mountain remains unmoved. It doesn't resist the storm or fight against it. It simply remains itself, solid and immovable, while the storm expends its energy and eventually passes. This is the mental state that intimidates others, not because it's aggressive or hostile, but because it's completely self-contained. The person with an unshakable mind doesn't need anything from you, not your approval, not your validation, not your permission. They've developed an internal source of strength that makes them independent of external circumstances. Think of it as psychological armor. Just as physical armor protects a warrior from arrows and swords, mental armor protects you from emotional manipulation, social pressure, and psychological attacks. The difference is that this armor doesn't make you heavy or slow. It makes you lighter and more agile, because you're no longer carrying the weight of other people's opinions and expectations. The unshakable mind can also be understood as a compass that always points toward your true north. No matter how chaotic the external environment becomes, no matter how many people try to convince you to change direction, your internal compass remains steady. This consistency is deeply unsettling to those who lack their own direction, because it highlights their own confusion and instability. Consider the metaphor of a river versus a lake. Most people's minds are like rivers, constantly flowing, changing direction based on the terrain, reacting to every obstacle in their path. The unshakable mind is like a deep lake, calm on the surface, profound in its depths, largely unaffected by surface disturbances. You can throw rocks into a lake, and while they may create ripples, they don't change the fundamental nature of the water. The sculptor metaphor is equally powerful. Every external challenge, criticism, or pressure is like a chisel strike that can either damage you or refine you, depending on your perspective and response. The person with mental weakness sees each strike as an attack and tries to avoid them. The person with mental strength sees each strike as an opportunity to become more precisely who they're meant to be. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man in the ancient world, understood that true power comes from mastering yourself rather than trying to control others. In his Meditations, he wrote about the necessity of maintaining your inner citadel, the inviolable core of your being that remains untouched by external circumstances. This inner citadel is what makes a person truly formidable, because you cannot threaten, manipulate, or control someone who doesn't need anything from the external world for their sense of identity and worth. The logical progression is clear. Mental weakness creates dependence, vulnerability, and limitation. Mental strength creates independence, invulnerability, and unlimited potential. The person who has developed genuine mental strength operates from a position of abundance rather than scarcity, confidence rather than insecurity, principle rather than preference. This transformation doesn't happen through positive thinking or surface-level techniques. It requires a fundamental reconstruction of how you understand yourself and your relationship to the world. It demands that you abandon the comfortable illusions of victimhood, the convenient excuses of circumstance, and the seductive appeal of blaming others for your internal state. The development of mental strength is like forging steel. Raw iron is soft and malleable, easily bent and broken. But when subjected to intense heat and pressure, then cooled and tempered properly, it becomes steel, harder, stronger, and more resilient than its original form. The challenges, criticisms, and pressures that break most people are the very forces that forge an unshakable mind in those who understand their transformative potential. The person who has completed this process becomes psychologically anti-fragile. They don't just survive stress and adversity, they become stronger because of it. Every attack makes them more resilient. Every criticism sharpens their understanding. Every challenge deepens their capability. This is why they become so intimidating to others. They've learned to transform poison into medicine, obstacles into opportunities, and enemies into teachers. The literature of self-mastery consistently points to the same truth. External circumstances have only the power over you that you give them. The unshakable mind has learned to give them no power at all. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent or disconnected. It means becoming selective about what deserves your emotional energy and what doesn't. When you truly understand that your mental state is your choice, that your responses are your responsibility, and that your character is your creation, you develop an inner authority that cannot be questioned or overthrown by external forces. This authority is visible to others and creates the kind of respect and intimidation that comes not from fear, but from recognition of genuine strength. Now comes the practical application. Understanding the principles is only the beginning. Transformation happens through consistent daily practice. The unshakable mind isn't built through dramatic moments or heroic gestures. It's forged through small, deliberate actions repeated so consistently that they become automatic responses to any situation life presents. You're going to learn 5 fundamental practices that will systematically rebuild your mental architecture. These aren't suggestions or recommendations. They're requirements for anyone serious about developing genuine mental strength. Each practice targets a specific aspect of mental weakness and replaces it with unshakable strength. Practice 1. Master the pause. Stop reacting immediately to anything that triggers an emotional response. This is your first and most crucial discipline. When someone criticizes you, don't defend yourself instantly. Pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Let the words settle before you respond. When you feel anger rising, don't express it immediately. Pause. Feel the emotion without being controlled by it. When you're pressured to make a quick decision, don't give in to the urgency. Pause. Create space between stimulus and response. This practice directly challenges the reactive patterns that keep most people trapped in mental weakness. Every time you pause instead of react, you're building mental muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can choose your response rather than being controlled by automatic patterns. Implement this immediately in your daily interactions. When your colleague makes that passive-aggressive comment, pause before responding. When your partner criticizes your decision, pause before defending yourself. When someone cuts you off in traffic, pause before feeling outraged. In each moment of pause, you're developing the capacity that separates the mentally strong from the mentally weak. The pause is your psychological reset button. It interrupts the unconscious patterns that have been running your life and creates space for conscious choice. Most people are emotional pinball machines, bouncing from reaction to reaction without any deliberate control. The pause transforms you into a chess master, thinking several moves ahead before making your response. Practice this particularly when you feel insulted or disrespected. These are the moments when most people's mental weakness is most visible. They become defensive, aggressive, or withdrawn because they haven't learned to pause and choose their response. When you remain calm and measured in these moments, others immediately recognize they're dealing with someone different, someone who cannot be easily rattled or manipulated. Practice 2. Challenge every limiting thought. Become ruthlessly analytical about your own thinking patterns. Question every thought that limits your potential or makes you feel powerless. When you catch yourself thinking, "I can't handle this," stop and ask, "Is that really true, or is it just a familiar pattern?" When you think, "They won't respect me," if I do this, challenge it. Am I making decisions based on facts or fears? When you think, "I'm not good enough for this opportunity," examine it. Where's the evidence for this belief, and what evidence contradicts it? Most people accept their thoughts as truth without examination. They believe every limiting story their mind tells them and live accordingly. This practice transforms you into the observer of your thoughts rather than their victim. You learn to separate helpful thoughts from harmful ones, fact-based thinking from fear-based thinking. Apply this rigorously throughout your day. When you hesitate to speak up in a meeting because you think, "They'll think I'm stupid," challenge that assumption. When you avoid asking for what you want because you think, "They'll say no," question that prediction. When you stay in situations that don't serve you because you think, "I don't have other options," examine that belief critically. This practice is particularly powerful when dealing with imposter syndrome or self-doubt. Instead of accepting feelings of inadequacy as truth, you learn to see them as mental habits that can be questioned and changed. You develop the ability to separate your temporary emotions from your permanent capabilities, your current feelings from your actual worth. The person with an unshakable mind has learned to be skeptical of their own limiting thoughts while being confident in their ability to handle whatever challenges arise. This combination creates a psychological foundation that cannot be shaken by external circumstances or internal doubts. Practice 3. Set non-negotiable standards. Establish clear boundaries about how you will and will not be treated, and enforce them consistently regardless of social pressure or potential consequences. Decide that you will not tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or abuse in any form. Determine that you will not compromise your values for temporary gains or social acceptance. Establish that you will not allow others to waste your time, drain your energy, or undermine your goals through their drama or incompetence. Then enforce these standards without exception. When someone treats you disrespectfully, address it immediately and directly. When someone tries to manipulate you, refuse to participate in their game. When someone wastes your time, politely but firmly redirect the conversation or end the interaction. This practice is where mental strength becomes visible to others. Most people have flexible standards that change based on who they're dealing with or what they might gain from compromising. They tolerate poor treatment from people they want, something from accept disrespect from those in authority, and allow their boundaries to be violated when it's convenient for others. Your non-negotiable standards communicate to the world that you value yourself and expect others to do the same. This immediately changes the dynamic of every relationship and interaction. People learn that they must earn your time and attention through respectful behavior, that they cannot manipulate you through emotional appeals or social pressure, and that crossing your boundaries has consequences. Apply this in professional situations where colleagues try to dump their responsibilities on you, in social situations where people attempt to draw you into gossip or drama, and in personal relationships where others try to guilt you into decisions that don't serve your best interests. The key is consistency. You cannot have non-negotiable standards that you negotiate away when it's inconvenient. Every time you enforce your standards, you're building respect, both from others and from yourself. Every time you compromise them, you're communicating that you don't really believe you deserve better treatment. Practice 4. Practice deliberate discomfort. Regularly place yourself in situations that challenge your comfort zone and require mental discipline to navigate successfully. Take cold showers to build tolerance for physical discomfort. Practice saying no to requests that don't align with your priorities, even when it disappoints others. Express unpopular opinions when they align with your values, regardless of social pressure to conform. Engage in difficult conversations rather than avoiding them. This practice builds psychological resilience by proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort without losing your center. Most people organize their entire lives around avoiding discomfort, which makes them weak and dependent on favorable circumstances. They need everything to go smoothly in order to maintain their equilibrium, which gives enormous power to anyone who can create difficulty or uncertainty. The person who regularly practices deliberate discomfort becomes anti-fragile. They learn that discomfort is temporary and manageable, that they can maintain their principles even when it costs them something, and that their mental state doesn't depend on external circumstances being perfect. Implement this by gradually increasing the level of challenge in your daily life. Start with small discomforts, sitting with your phone off for an hour, exercising when you don't feel like it, having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Progress to larger challenges, public speaking, negotiating for better terms, standing up to authority figures when necessary. Each act of deliberate discomfort builds mental calluses that protect you from future challenges. You develop confidence in your ability to handle whatever life throws at you, because you've proven to yourself that you can choose your response regardless of circumstances. This practice is particularly effective for overcoming social anxiety and people-pleasing behaviors. When you regularly do things that might disappoint or upset others in service of your own growth and values, you break the psychological dependency that keeps most people trapped in weakness. Practice 5. Cultivate strategic detachment. Learn to engage fully with life while remaining emotionally detached from outcomes you cannot control. Invest your best effort in your work, relationships, and goals, but don't tie your self-worth to the results. Care deeply about your performance while remaining indifferent to others' opinions of it. Pursue your objectives with intensity while accepting that external factors may influence the outcomes. This is perhaps the most sophisticated practice because it requires you to simultaneously care and not care, to be passionate about your process while being dispassionate about results. Most people either care too much, becoming anxious and desperate, or too little, becoming apathetic and uncommitted. Strategic detachment allows you to maintain peak performance without being destabilized by disappointment or success. Apply this when you're waiting for important news about a job, relationship, or opportunity. Instead of anxiously checking your phone or obsessing over outcomes, focus on what you can control: your preparation, your effort, your response to whatever happens. When you receive criticism or praise, acknowledge it without allowing it to significantly affect your self-perception. This practice makes you incredibly intimidating to others because they can sense that their approval or disapproval doesn't control you. You're not desperate for their validation, you're not crushed by their criticism, and you're not inflated by their praise. This emotional independence creates a psychological power that others find both attractive and unsettling. Practice strategic detachment in small daily situations. When you send an important email, send it with care, but don't obsess over the response. When you make a presentation, prepare thoroughly but don't tie your self-worth to the audience's reaction. When you ask for what you want, ask clearly and confidently, but remain emotionally unattached to whether you receive it. The cumulative effect of these 5 practices is a complete transformation in how you experience and respond to life. You become someone who cannot be easily shaken because you've systematically addressed every source of mental weakness. You've learned to pause instead of react, to question instead of accept, to maintain standards instead of compromise, to embrace discomfort instead of avoid it, and to care deeply while remaining detached from outcomes. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than most people expect when you practice consistently. Within weeks, you'll notice that things that used to upset you no longer affect you. Within months, you'll find that people treat you differently, with more respect, more caution, and more genuine admiration. Within a year, you'll have built a psychological foundation so solid that external circumstances cannot shake your inner peace or disrupt your progress toward your goals. Each practice reinforces the others. The pause gives you space to challenge limiting thoughts. Non-negotiable standards give you something to maintain during deliberate discomfort. Strategic detachment helps you enforce your standards without being attached to others' reactions. Together, they create an unshakable mental fortress that protects and empowers you in every situation. Remember, these practices are not suggestions for when you feel motivated or when circumstances are favorable. They are daily disciplines that you implement regardless of your mood, energy level, or external pressure. The person with an unshakable mind practices mental strength when it's easy and when it's difficult, when they feel like it and when they don't, when others support them and when others oppose them. Start today. Choose one practice and implement it immediately in the next challenging situation you encounter. Notice how it feels to respond from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than automaticity, from principle rather than impulse. This feeling This sense of personal power and inner authority is your birthright. These practices are simply the tools to reclaim it. There are moments in your transformation when you need more than techniques and practices. You need symbols that speak to something deeper than your conscious mind. Metaphors that capture the essence of who you're becoming and anchor that identity so firmly that no external force can dislodge it. These living symbols become part of your psychological DNA, guiding your responses and strengthening your resolve when the world tests your commitment to mental strength. The ancient oak, rooted strength and flexible wisdom. Picture an ancient oak tree that has stood for centuries in the same spot, weathering countless storms, droughts, and seasons of change. Its massive trunk is scarred by lightning strikes, its bark roughened by time and elements, yet it stands more magnificent now than in its youth. This tree is your template for unshakable strength. The oak's power doesn't come from rigidity, it comes from deep roots and flexible branches. When hurricane winds threaten to topple it, the oak doesn't fight the storm directly. Its roots, extending far beneath the visible surface, anchor it to something solid and unmovable. Its branches, though strong, bend with the wind rather than breaking against it. The oak yields to forces it cannot control while never yielding its essential nature. You are becoming this oak. Your roots are the principles you've chosen to live by, extending deep into your character where no one can see them, but everyone can sense their presence. These roots don't just anchor you, they nourish you, drawing strength from sources that others cannot access or understand. Your principles of mental discipline, emotional mastery, and strategic thinking become the underground foundation that supports everything visible about you. Like the oak, you learn to distinguish between what deserves resistance and what calls for flexibility. When someone challenges your core values, you stand unmovable, rooted in principles that have been tested and proven. But when external circumstances change, when people disappoint you, when plans don't unfold as expected, you bend without breaking. You adapt without compromising your essential nature. The oak doesn't waste energy being offended by storms. It doesn't take lightning strikes personally or feel victimized by droughts. It simply endures, grows stronger, and continues reaching toward the light, regardless of what temporary weather patterns pass through its environment. This is your new relationship with criticism, setbacks, and challenges. They're just weather patterns that will pass while you continue growing toward your goals. Notice how the oak influences its environment without effort. Smaller plants grow. In its shade, animals find shelter in its branches, and people seek rest beneath its canopy. The oak provides these benefits not through trying or wanting to help, but simply by being what it is. Your mental strength will work the same way. Others will naturally gravitate toward your stability, seek your counsel during turbulent times, and find peace in your presence without you having to try to help them. The scars on the oak's bark tell the story of its strength, not its weakness. Each lightning strike that didn't destroy it made it more magnificent. Each storm that didn't uproot it deepened its roots. Each challenge that didn't break it proved its resilience. Your past struggles, criticisms, and failures are becoming part of your strength in the same way. They're not evidence of your inadequacy. They're proof of your capacity to endure and transform. When you feel shaken by external circumstances, return to the image of the oak. Feel your roots extending deep into principles that cannot be moved. Sense your flexibility, allowing you to bend with forces you cannot control while never compromising your essential nature. Know that you're growing stronger with each challenge, more magnificent with each test, more deeply rooted with each storm you weather successfully. The master archer, focused intent and patient precision in vision. A master archer standing at the edge of a field. Bow drawn, arrow nocked, completely still except for the steady rhythm of breathing. The target is distant and small, barely visible to untrained eyes. Wind moves across the field, creating variables that would confuse and frustrate a novice. But the master archer remains perfectly calm, perfectly focused, waiting for the precise moment when all conditions align. This archer represents your relationship with your goals and the focused intention required to achieve them. Like the archer, you've learned that success isn't about force or speed. It's about precision, timing, and unwavering focus on what truly matters. The archer doesn't waste energy being frustrated by the wind or impatient with the distance two ways. The target. These are simply conditions to be understood and worked with, not obstacles to be resented. The wind becomes information about trajectory. The distance becomes data about force and angle. The moving target becomes a puzzle to be solved through observation and skill. Your approach to challenges is transforming in the same way. Criticism becomes information about how you're being perceived and what you might need to adjust. Setbacks become data about what's working and what isn't. Opposition becomes intelligence about what forces you're dealing with and how to navigate them most effectively. The master archer has trained for thousands of hours to develop the steady hand, keen eye, and patient focus that make precision possible. This training happened in private, away from applause or recognition, driven purely by the desire to master the craft. Your mental discipline is being developed the same way, through consistent daily practice that others don't see, but everyone eventually experiences through your unshakable presence. Notice the archer's relationship with the bow and arrow. These are tools that extend the archer's capability, but they're useless without skill, focus, and proper technique. Your practices of mental strength, the pause, the questioning of limiting thoughts, the non-negotiable standards, these are your bow and arrow. They're powerful tools, but their effectiveness depends entirely on your commitment to using them with precision and consistency. The archer doesn't release the arrow until the moment is exactly right. There's no rushing, no impatience, no compromise. On standards just to get a result quickly. The arrow, once released, flies straight and true to its target because everything was aligned before the moment of action. Your decisions and responses are becoming equally precise. You're learning to wait for the right moment, to act only when all your inner resources are aligned, to commit fully once you've chosen your direction. Most people fire arrows hastily, without proper aim, then wonder why they miss their targets. They make decisions based on emotion rather than clarity, act from impulse rather than intention, and blame external factors when their efforts don't produce the desired results. The master archer in you has learned that the quality of your preparation determines the accuracy of your results. When facing important decisions or challenging situations, return to the image of the master archer. Feel the steady calm that comes from knowing you've trained for this moment. Sense the focused clarity that filters out all distractions, except what truly matters. Trust the patience that waits for the right moment, rather than forcing premature action. Know that when you do act, it will be with the precision and power that comes from perfect inner alignment. The lighthouse, unwavering purpose in stormy seas, stand now as a lighthouse perched on rocky cliffs above a turbulent ocean. Below you, ships struggle against massive waves, their crews panicking as they're tossed by forces beyond their control. The storm rages with incredible fury, sending spray high into the air, creating chaos and confusion for everyone caught in its power. But you remain steady, your light cutting through the darkness, providing guidance and hope to all who need direction. This lighthouse is who you are becoming, a fixed point of strength and clarity in a world full of turbulence and confusion. Your light doesn't eliminate the storm, doesn't calm the waves, doesn't make the journey easy for others, but it provides something infinitely more valuable, a reference point that helps others navigate safely through whatever challenges they face. The lighthouse doesn't choose when to shine based on weather conditions or the worthiness of those who need guidance. It simply shines consistently and reliably because that's its nature and purpose. Your mental strength works the same way. You don't maintain your principles only when it's convenient or appreciated. You don't offer stability only to those who deserve it. You simply embody strength and clarity because that's who you've chosen to become. Notice how the lighthouse influences everything around it without moving from its position. Ships change course based on its light. Sailors feel hope because of its presence. The entire maritime environment becomes safer because of its unwavering function. Your unshakable mind creates similar effects in your social and professional environment. People modify their behavior around you because they recognize They're dealing with someone of substance. They feel more secure in chaotic situations because your presence reminds them that stability is possible. The lighthouse has been built to withstand the worst storms nature can produce. Its foundation is sunk deep into solid rock. Its structure is designed to flex slightly with extreme winds without breaking, and its light mechanism is protected but never extinguished. Your mental architecture is being built with the same engineering principles. Your foundation, your core values and principles, is anchored in something deeper and more permanent than circumstances. Your responses are designed to flex with external pressure without compromising your essential integrity. The storms that rage around the lighthouse are temporary, but the lighthouse itself is permanent. Specific weather patterns come and go, individual ships may be saved or lost, but the lighthouse continues its mission regardless of daily events. You're developing this same perspective on the temporary dramas and challenges that occupy most people's attention. Problems that seem overwhelming to others become minor weather patterns to you, significant enough to notice and respond to appropriately, but not significant enough to shake your fundamental sense of purpose and direction. The lighthouse's light has a specific range and intensity. It doesn't try to illuminate the entire ocean. It focuses on providing the exact guidance needed for safe passage through dangerous waters. Your influence is becoming equally focused and powerful. You're not trying to fix everyone's problems or control every situation. You're providing exactly what's needed, a stable reference point that helps others navigate their own challenges more effectively. When you feel overwhelmed by the chaos around you, when others are panicking and demanding that you join their hysteria, when the storms of criticism and pressure seem overwhelming, return to the image of the lighthouse. Feel your foundation anchored in something deeper than temporary circumstances. Sense your light cutting through confusion and providing clarity. Know that your steady presence is exactly what the situation requires, even if others don't immediately recognize or appreciate it. These three metaphors, the ancient oak, the master archer, and the lighthouse, live within you now. They're not just pretty images or motivational symbols. They're templates for how you understand yourself and your role in the world. When external circumstances test your resolve, when others try to shake your confidence, when you're tempted to abandon your principles for temporary gains, these symbols remind you who you really are. You are the oak that bends but never breaks, rooted in principles deeper than any storm. You are the archer, whose focus and patience create precision and power. You are the lighthouse whose steady light guides others through whatever darkness they face. This is not who you're trying to become. This is who you already are, waiting to be fully expressed through your daily choices and responses. The person with an unshakable mind doesn't just practice mental discipline. They embody it so completely that it becomes their natural way of being. These metaphors help that embodiment become complete, turning practices into identity, techniques into character, and discipline into destiny. You've reached the summit of mental mastery, the place where technique transforms into transcendence and discipline becomes destiny. At this level, you discover that the most powerful weapon in your psychological arsenal isn't what you say or do. It's what you choose not to say and not to do. You learn to wield silence like a master swordsman wields a blade, creating space that others fill with their own insecurities and revealing truths that words could never express. The power of strategic silence. Silence is not emptiness, it's fullness. It's not the absence of communication, it's the most powerful communication possible. When you've developed true mental strength, you understand that most situations don't require your words, your explanations, or your justifications. You learn to let others speak first, reveal their intentions, and show their character while you observe from a position of calm awareness. Practice this immediately. When someone criticizes you, resist the urge to defend yourself instantly. Let their words hang in the air. Often they'll begin explaining themselves, qualifying their criticism, or even apologizing for their tone. Your silence creates psychological pressure that reveals their true motivations and often diffuses their attack more effectively than any argument could. When someone makes an unreasonable demand, Don't rush to explain why you can't accommodate them. Pause. Let them experience the weight of their own request in the silence you create. This often leads them to modify their demand or acknowledge its unreasonableness without you having to refuse directly. Use silence strategically in negotiations. When someone makes an offer, don't respond immediately, even if it's exactly what you want. Let them sit with their proposal in the silence you create. They'll often improve their offer, add benefits, or reveal information that strengthens your position. Your silence becomes a negotiating tool more powerful than any argument or counteroffer. The person with an unshakable mind has learned that words often weaken your position rather than strengthen it. Every explanation you give provides ammunition for further attacks. Every justification suggests that you doubt your own decisions. Every defense implies that you believe the criticism might be valid. Strategic silence avoids all these traps while maintaining your dignity and psychological advantage. This doesn't mean becoming cold or disconnected. It means becoming selective about when and how you engage. You speak when your words add value, when silence would be unkind, or when communication serves your principles. You remain silent when others are trying to drag you into their drama, when explanations would be wasted on closed minds, or when your presence alone communicates everything necessary. Transcending attachment to outcomes. The ultimate freedom comes when you care deeply about your process while remaining emotionally detached from specific results. This paradox, passionate engagement combined with serene detachment, represents the highest level of mental mastery. You invest your best effort, maintain your highest standards, and pursue your goals with intensity, but you don't tie your self-worth or emotional state to whether you achieve exactly what you initially intended. This detachment isn't indifference. It's wisdom. You understand that external outcomes are influenced by variables beyond your control, other people's decisions, market conditions, timing, luck, and countless factors you can't predict or influence. What you can control completely is your effort, your attitude, your preparation, and your response to whatever happens. When you truly embody this principle, you become psychologically invincible. Success doesn't inflate your ego because you know it's partly due to factors beyond your control. Failure doesn't deflate your confidence because you know it doesn't reflect your worth or capabilities. You maintain emotional equilibrium regardless of external results, which allows you to learn from both success and failure without being distorted by either. Practice this detachment daily. When you send an important email, send it with care, but don't obsess over the response. When you apply for opportunities, apply with excellence, but don't tie your self-worth to being selected. When you invest effort in relationships, give generously, but don't demand specific responses or outcomes. This detachment creates enormous psychological power because others sense that their approval or disapproval doesn't control you. You're not desperate for their validation, you're not crushed by their rejection, and you're not inflated by their praise. This emotional independence is deeply intimidating to those who use approval and disapproval to manipulate others. The foundation of daily discipline. Your unshakable mind is maintained through daily practices that most people abandon as soon as life gets busy or challenging. But you understand that these practices aren't luxuries for when you have time. They're necessities that create the mental strength you need to handle whatever demands arise. Begin each day with 10 minutes of deliberate silence. Not meditation with techniques or goals, just sitting quietly and observing your thoughts without being controlled by them. This daily practice builds the mental muscle of observation that allows you to separate yourself from your thoughts and emotions throughout the day. Maintain a daily gratitude practice, but not the superficial version that most people attempt. Don't just list things you're grateful for. Genuinely feel appreciation for the challenges that have made you stronger, the setbacks that taught you valuable lessons, and the difficulties that revealed your true capabilities. This transforms every experience into a source of strength rather than a reason for resentment. Exercise your body with the same discipline you apply to your mind. Physical strength supports mental strength, and the discipline required to maintain your body builds the discipline you need to maintain your mental standards. Choose challenging physical activities that require you to push through discomfort, teaching your mind that you can choose your response regardless of how you feel. Read daily from sources that challenge and elevate your thinking, not entertainment or news that feeds your reactive mind, but philosophy, biography, and wisdom literature that strengthens your understanding of human nature and your own potential. Feed your mind deliberately, rather than accepting whatever the world happens to present. End each day by reviewing your actions and responses. Did you maintain your standards? Did you practice mental discipline when it was difficult? Did you respond from strength or react from weakness? This daily audit builds self-awareness and ensures that you're actually living according to your principles rather than just thinking about them. The integration of all principles you've learned to pause before. Reacting. Creating space between stimulus and response where conscious choice becomes possible. You've developed the habit of questioning limiting thoughts rather than accepting them as truth. You've established non-negotiable standards for how you'll be treated and what you'll tolerate. You've practiced deliberate discomfort to build resilience and prove your capability. You've cultivated strategic detachment that allows you to care deeply while remaining emotionally independent of outcomes. These practices have transformed from techniques into aspects of your character. You no longer have to think about pausing. It happens automatically when you encounter triggering situations. You no longer struggle to maintain your standards. They've become so deeply embedded that compromising them feels impossible. You no longer fear criticism or pressure because you've proven to yourself repeatedly that you can handle anything while maintaining your integrity. The ancient oak, master archer, and lighthouse have become more than metaphors. They're aspects of your identity that guide your responses and strengthen your resolve. You bend without breaking like the oak, focus with patient precision like the archer, and provide steady guidance like the lighthouse. Regardless of external conditions, this transformation has created ripple effects throughout your life. People treat you differently because they sense they're dealing with someone who cannot be easily manipulated or intimidated. Opportunities appear because others recognize your reliability and mental strength. Relationships improve because you attract people who appreciate genuine strength rather than those who prey on weakness. But perhaps most importantly, you've discovered that mental strength isn't a destination. It's a way of traveling. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to practice your principles. Each criticism becomes a chance to demonstrate your emotional independence. Each pressure becomes a test that proves your capabilities. You've learned to transform every external circumstance into internal strength. Your moment of decision, you stand now at a crossroads that will determine not just your future, but your fundamental identity. Everything you've learned, every principle you've understood, every practice you've discovered means nothing unless you decide to embody them consistently, regardless of circumstances, moods, or external pressure. The person with an unshakable mind doesn't practice mental discipline when it's convenient. They practice it especially when it's difficult. They don't maintain their standards only when others support them. They maintain them most rigorously when others oppose them. They don't choose strategic silence only in comfortable situations. They use it precisely when every instinct screams for reaction and defense. This is your choice. Will you be someone who knows about mental strength or someone who embodies it? Will you be someone who admires these principles in others or someone who lives them regardless of cost? Will you be someone who practices these disciplines when you feel like it or someone who practices them especially when you don't? The world is full of people who have read about success, studied achievement, and understand what it takes to develop genuine strength. But understanding and embodying are completely different levels of existence. You can know everything about building muscle and remain physically weak. You can understand every principle of financial success and remain broke. You can study every aspect of mental strength and still be emotionally reactive and psychologically fragile. Knowledge becomes power only through consistent application. Principles become character only through daily practice. Understanding becomes wisdom only through lived experience under pressure. The gap between knowing and being is bridged through the disciplined repetition of right actions until they become automatic responses. Your unshakable mind will be tested. Others will try to provoke you into reactive behavior because you're calm. Strength makes them uncomfortable with their own weakness. Critics will attack your principles because your consistency highlights their inconsistency. Manipulative people will work harder to control you because you've become immune to their usual tactics. These tests are not obstacles to your development, they're proof of your development. The fact that others feel compelled to test your mental strength means they recognize you possess something they lack. Your calm response to these tests will further cement your reputation as someone who cannot be rattled, manipulated, or controlled through external pressure. Remember, every moment offers you the choice between strength and weakness, between reaction and response, between being controlled by circumstances or controlling your response to circumstances. The person with an unshakable mind makes the choice for strength so consistently that it becomes their automatic response to any situation. When you master this level of mental discipline, you become a force of nature that others can neither ignore nor resist. You command respect without demanding it, create influence without seeking it, and inspire others without trying to inspire them. Your presence alone communicates strength, your silence speaks louder than others' words, and your consistency creates trust that words could never establish. The journey you've undertaken, from reactive weakness to unshakable strength, represents one of the most profound transformations possible for a human being. You've learned to separate your identity from your emotions, your worth from others' opinions, and your peace from external circumstances. You've developed the capacity to remain centered in chaos, principled under pressure, and calm in the face of any storm. This is not the end of your development, it's the beginning of your true life. Now that you possess genuine mental strength, you can pursue your goals without being derailed by criticism, build relationships without being dependent on others' approval, and face challenges without being intimidated by their difficulty. When you dominate the realm of mental strength, when you've built an unshakable mind that intimidates others through its sheer presence and unwavering commitment to principle, nothing and no one will ever be able to control, manipulate, or destabilize you again. You will have achieved the ultimate freedom, the freedom that comes from complete mastery over your own mind. Your time is now. Your moment is here. Your unshakable mind awaits your commitment to make it real through daily discipline and unwavering consistency. Begin today. Begin now. Begin with your next thought, your next response, your next choice between strength and weakness. The world needs people with unshakable minds. Become one of them.